We see that a large population of those incarcerated are actually guilty of violent crime, but it has been recorded that violent crime rates actually decreased during the prison building boom. However, in 1995, approximately less than a third of the inmates had been convicted for a crime violent in nature, and the number today is more mixed than anything. The incarceration now includes people waiting for trial, petty offenses, nonviolent crimes, and more. Take Crystal's case from the documentary Prison State: The Cycle of Incarceration in the United States. 15-year-old Crystal was sent to juvenile detention center on the basis of school truancy. Although she had been previously diagnosed with bipolar ADHD, she was never offered mental health services at her school, in her community, nor in the prison system. A similar story followed 14-year-old Demetria, who had accumulated 11 charges over her short life. At the age of 9, she experienced the death of her mother and never fully recovered from the trauma. It takes approximately $87,000 per year to maintain an incarcerated child. As Michelle Alexander stated in the documentary, even the smallest infractions are treated as criminal. What this ends up doing to the child who grows up in such an environment as Crystal and Demetria is that it instills in them a culture of incarceration, a numbing belief that what is occurring to them is normal. Older people, such as veteran Charles McDuffie, who served in the 11th Cavalry in Vietnam, also did not receive proper services. Plagued with post-traumatic stress disorder from the war and crippled by addictions that stemmed as a coping mechanism, McDuffie received no mental health treatment in all of his time in prison. Upon his release, he was offered the clothes he wore and a means of transportation to the nearest town. Due to mental illnesses and oftentimes substance abuse as a result, many who are released from prison are sent back because they simply were not prepared to re-enter civilization. They do not have proper tools to find a job, nor do they have housing, a means of transportation, nor any connections willing enough to help. Even when individuals have been released from prison, they are given the clothes on their back and little means of getting ahead. There are also requirements that ex-inmates have to meet in order to keep their freedom. Some of those involve paying a set amount of money every month, not being able to move states or sometimes even cities, and mandatory checkups. For those that have been incarcerated for many years, it is difficult for them to find jobs willing to hire, which in turn prevents them from paying their fine or from even surviving. When crime is all an individual knows as a means of getting ahead, they will most likely turn to crime when they see no other way of success. In the Prison State documentary, it is brilliantly stated, the true definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting the results to be different. This is not to imply that some individuals do not deserve their sentence, but it is clearly and abundantly obvious that the main problem with the prison industrial complex is not merely the individuals who suffer life sentences from petty crimes, nor the abuse that is received by those individuals, nor the blurred lines between anger and fear. In 1998, the United States had 1.8 million people behind bars. Today, there are approximately 2.3 million people incarcerated. No matter what the crime or offense was, prison has been the ultimate answer in our American justice system. In the short documentary, A Sentence Apart, a young inmate's daughter bravely states, "It costs approximately $64,000 a year to keep my dad in jail, but my family makes $25,000. Why does it cost so much to keep my dad in jail, but I have to share a book with someone in my class?" The problem is the culture that has been instilled from this complex. Our society is proven to value incarceration more than rehabilitation. We value detaining prisoners more than encouraging students. The values that we have instilled through the prison industrial complex has become evident and has bled through almost every aspect of our society. These stories, like many others, illustrate the dark and complex ways in which mass incarceration has shifted our values and has monopolized the downfall of individuals. Core Civic, formerly known as Corrections Corporation of America, was founded in 1983 by businessmen with little former experience with correctional facilities. It still stands as the nation's largest private prison company, recording $1.83 billion in revenue in 2018. Among Core Civic is the GEO Group, formerly known as Wake and Hut Corrections, and the U.S. Corrections Corporation. They are America's biggest private prison companies, and essentially those who profit the most from the prison industrial complex. As stated by Julia Sudbury in Unpacking the Crisis, Women of Color, Globalization, and the Prison Industrial Complex, the corporations and their stakeholders that profit from these transactions in turn benefit from and actively promote criminal justice policies that guarantee rising rates of incarceration. What we have today is what Michelle Alexander describes in her book, The New Jim Crow. Before Jim Crow, or the invention of the different races, existed the colonial population. During this time, settlements remained small and indentured servitude was the main means of cheap labor. When plantation farming expanded, the demand of labor and those plantations were met by the fulfilling role of African Americans. After Bacon's Rebellion, when the planter class extended the idea of a racial bribe, poor whites all of a sudden had a direct connection to the existence of slavery. Because their class and wealth were now heightened due to a new lower class, they were more likely to endorse the institution of slavery. Today, we have these institutions and jobs created specifically for mass incarceration. Job positions, programs, and titles that would not otherwise exist without the prison industrial complex. This introduces the personal stake that Alexander described. This is why, much like the belief of racism outlived slavery, so too will the prison complex belief outlive the industry of mass incarceration. There is a difference between wanting to keep criminals off the streets in order to keep citizens safe and blinding the citizenry with fear of an epidemic that does not exist. It is different to criminalize behavior claiming to want to solve the problem but then not help the individuals change. If we are to progress, if we are to resolve this problem, we need to differentiate offenses because not every crime is equal under our justice system. We need to fund service providers and stop monopolizing the downfalls of individuals.
We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic processes. We should take nothing for granted. Only an alert and knowledgeable citizenry can compel the proper meshing of the huge industrial and military machinery of defense with our peaceful methods and goals, so that security and liberty may prosper together.
We need to debunk this culture that is the prison industrial complex.